Hey friends, welcome back to another video. My name is Lefebvre, and today I'm going to show you how I add colored pencils to my watercolor landscapes. So I've been loving using them to add texture and depth, and today I'm going to show you exactly how I do that. So let's jump in and get started. Okay friends, so today I'm going to be showing you how I add colored pencils to my watercolor landscapes. The first half of this video is actually on Patreon, where I go through how I drew this and then add the watercolor to it. I also showed how I have been doing these little kind of sketches to start, just to get my brain wrapped around the shapes and the colors that I want to use, and I find that it's been so helpful. So if you're interested in seeing the whole version of how I painted this, you can definitely check out on Patreon. It's part of my first tier where you get 3 bonus exclusive tutorials just for patrons that are not on YouTube, plus all of my ad-free content from YouTube on there, and a community chat, which is super fun, just for $3 a month, and that's Canadian, so it's even cheaper in a lot of other currencies. But if you're interested in watching the watercolor portion, the first layer of this, you can go check it out on Patreon. But today I'm going to show you how I use my colored pencils to add dimension, depth, texture to my watercolor landscapes. So recently, you guys have seen that I've been using a lot of my colored pencils for things. We did this with Florals in a video not too long ago, which is so much fun to do, and people have requested landscapes, and I did this on my own as a little landscape study. I did watercolor, then added the colored pencils over top. So I thought I would show you today how I was going to do it with these 2 paintings. Now these are from 2 different reference photos, which I will place in the top right-hand corner so you guys can kind of see. But what I do is I kind of sketch out my ideas. I don't try and copy, stroke for stroke, tree for tree from a reference photo. I just try and gain inspiration through colors, looking at shadows and light sources, and use it that way instead of copying exactly what I see in a reference photo, unless that someone has asked me to. But for this, I just kind of gained some inspiration, and I'm going to be looking at a lot of the colors and the light sources. So I did my first wash with watercolor. The book that I'm using is a mixed media sketchbook. It's a Strathmore mixed media sketchbook. It's very smooth paper, so it's perfect for colored pencils. If you were using a cold press paper, it might be really hard to add the colored pencils, so I definitely suggest doing this on a smoother mixed media paper or even a hot press paper. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with my pencils and show you. So the pencils I'm using are these Luminance Caran d'Ache colored pencils. They are not watercolor pencils. They are just regular colored pencils. If you would like to use watercolor pencils, you can definitely do so, but I've just been enjoying the texture that these provide without, being watercolor pencils. So I'm going to go into my sky to start, and I'm just trying to color match as best as I can. If the pencil color doesn't match my watercolor perfectly, I don't really worry too much about it. I just kind of wing it and go with it. Now this grayish color is kind of similar. I actually used a lavender for the sky, for the kind of grayness in the sky. And what I like to use the pencils for is just adding a little bit of darkness and depth, but also just I'm really enjoying the texture. So I'm just adding a little bit of the darkness to some of the bottom of the clouds. I get a little heavier handed to make it darker, and then I start to kind of blend upwards so it's just not as harsh, a lighter color. Just kind of controlling the pressure of the pencil. Now this pencil is definitely a little bit more gray than the lavender color, but I actually kind of like it. It's adding a little bit more depth that way. I'm just adding little bits of depth in there like that. And one thing I really like about colored pencils, which I I think I've mentioned before, is that you can layer light colors on top of dark ones. So you can even take your white crayons and pencil in some clouds. And it's very, very soft and subtle. But if you feel like you missed, you know, an opportunity to get some of the lighter colors in there, you can use your pencils to do that. And you'll also see I do that with some of the flowers and stuff over top too, and highlights on the trees. Okay, so I don't want to do too much with the clouds, but just a little bit of depth in there. And I feel like that also makes it really interesting to look at. Okay, so for the trees, I actually did 2 layers with watercolor. I did like a base layer of like a medium green, and then when it was dry, I went over with my brush and just did some texture over top, just kind of dabbing it with a lighter green towards the top of the trees and a darker green towards the bottom. Here, I can just kind of enhance that a little bit. I might grab like a really bright green and just kind of add little marks to the tops of the trees. Just scribbles. And the way that I'm kind of approaching these landscapes, obviously they're not realistic looking. You know, they're a lot more stylized, kind of loose, and just more like illustrative. Okay, I'm not trying to make it super detailed or anything. I'm going to go in with like a medium kind of olive green. I know you can't tell too much because I did a lot of the texture with the darker ones, with the watercolor. But just adding a little bit more texture. That's what I kind of love to do with these pencils, is just little spots. It's really going to make a difference, I feel like, I hope, with the darker green. I just need to find all my colors, this darker green. Okay, and you can really get into some of those areas and just add some texture in there. And I'm just kind of scribbling. Honestly, just little scribbles here and there. I'm just going to use my sharpener a bit. There we go. Just to get some smaller little marks in between so you can really see some of that separation of the trees. And maybe not necessarily the leaves, but just to give it a bit more depth by adding in that darkness. And already I feel like it's popping out so much more with the added darker bits. You can even just darken right at the bottom. If you would like to add some sort of, you know, brown tree trunks in there, like maybe you see some, you can always do that. Like I said, it layers on top of the lighter color or darker colors. So that's a bonus of using the pencils. Just little hints of brown in there that you wouldn't get with watercolor. Like so. Okay. Then I'm going to go into my path here and just kind of scribble a little bit on the dirt area. Just a little bit. Further away you don't see as much, so I'm just doing like little lines. As it gets closer, it's a little bit lighter towards the center of the path, and then towards the the sides it gets a little bit darker. So I'm leaving this kind of open of just like that light watercolor. I'm just kind of going around the sides. See that? How that adds a little bit more depth. And if you want to just blend it a bit more, just use really light pressure. I would even like to make it a little bit deeper with a darker brown just at the sides. I'm going to do the same thing with the greenery, but with the brown, just like a little bit. I actually might add that at the end, just so I can see where I'm putting my greenery first. Okay, So for the flower field that's all yellow, again, I did like a wash of yellow, some green and stuff like that with my watercolor, let it dry, and then I just like kind of tapped in some yellow over top. I don't want to spend all my time doing these tiny little marks of yellow to get the texture, so that's why I tapped it over top. But what I might do is I might just kind of, it gives a nice texture as it is, so I'm just going to kind of just draw over just to intensify the yellow a bit more. Because you don't really see those flower shapes unless you get up close, which we see a bit more here, which I can do a bit more detail. But for further away, I'm actually going to grab a lighter yellow too, like that's kind of like white yellowy color. Blend it with some highlights. It's subtle, but it's there. Might even grab like a brighter lemon yellow just for some areas. And then I'm just going to grab a little bit of my light green and also just add some in there. Just kind of over the areas where there was already green in the background. Now I do want a little bit of shadow in the yellow, I think. So I'm going to grab a deeper yellow and just add some kind of darker parts. So it's not just this one shade of yellow all the way across. Just gives it a little bit more depth when you have different values of yellow. So I'm using like this yellow ochre kind of color. And then as we get up closer, I'm going to sharpen my yellow. I'm going to sharpen a light yellow and then also a yellow ochre color. So we can get a little bit more detail of some of the flowers. Okay. So I'm just going to use the yellow and I'm just going to start doing these like little kind of ovals. Because up close, the closer the flowers are in the field to us, the more detail we'll see. Now, again, like I said, I'm not doing a lot of detail, but you can start to see some more shapes. Even if it's not detail, you'll start to see more shapes the closer it is to us. And already, like here, I feel like that makes a big difference doing those shapes. Grab a little bit of dark yellow. You can even add some shadow to some of those. Or just kind of go in between and do some dark ones, light ones. But really you're just seeing more of that texture up front. Okay. Then comes the green. So I'm going to grab a couple different greens and then make sure they're nice and sharp because I want to start adding some texture to our grass and some depth. So you can see already the green areas here are already pretty flat. Where's that dark green? Here's the dark green. So I'm grabbing 3 different greens. So I can kind of go in between and add dimension. So I'm going to start kind of like with watercolor, just adding lighter bits, and then I'm just going to kind of work my way into the darker parts. So I'm just kind of doing long kind of grass strokes with this lightest green. Again, so loose, literally scribbles. Okay, and then I'm going to go in with my medium green. Maybe you see some more of these stems a little bit more defined. The green around the curve of the path too is a bit more defined. And like there are these long kind of stems like that. And then for this section in the center, I'm going to leave the middle part the lightest, and then we're just going to darken either side like that. Okay. Maybe a bit of shading in here, just a little bit. And then our darkest color, oops, is gonna frame kind of the bottom here. This is where the least amount of sunlight would get, at the bottom of these flowers. Make it a bit more scratchy. Like that. See how that depth really kind of makes it come to life? And it's so easy to achieve with like literal scribbles. It's kind of why I love working loosely like this. It's just there's a lot less pressure for it to be perfect, and I'm literally scribbling different ways. Like that. I kind of want to make it a little bit darker towards the bottom here. Like that. I might add a little bit more, maybe yellow up front. But that's basically it for that one. I love the way it looks, and you can do as much or as little detail as you like. So there's our first one. That's how I would add pencils to that one. And then, actually, hold on, I'm going to add a little bit more green in here. Like you could just keep going. It's so fun. I love adding the pencils. Okay. And then with this one, so our reference photo here, fairly flat and simple. I don't know if I'm going to do too much to the sky. I mean, I could. I might add a little bit more of the gray down here and just slowly blend up. But I don't want to do too much to it. A little bit more gray behind here. What I can do is grab my white, because this one has the white clouds that are kind of blended in, and just kind of blend it in with the gray. But I like the softness of these clouds kind of mixing in with that blue. I don't want to do too much to it. I do want to focus more on the hills and stuff. So here I want to make the hills a little bit brighter. So I'm actually going to grab some of my yellow, just add a little bit more sunshine to the top here, like that. Maybe even a little bit of our light yellow color, just so it looks like the sun kind of hit it over there. Our trees has sun kind of hitting it from this side, so I'm going to add some yellow. See, this is what I love about having the pencils, is you can layer these light yellow colors over top of the green, which you wouldn't really be able to do too much with watercolor. I'm gonna grab medium green. I might just go back in with the dark. And I'm just gonna add some texture with this dark. I'm gonna have the shadow on the left side. And it just really adds so much depth to this. And especially at the bottom too. I love trees that look like this. They're a lot of fun to draw, and they're very easy to draw and paint. Love that. I can take my brown if I want, add a little bit more to the tree trunks here, but then I'll take my darker brown and just add it a little bit more darkness on the left side where there would be a shadow. And then from there, I'm going to take my dark green and I'm going to draw out a bit more shadow, kind of coming this way. So I did a base with the watercolor first, but I want to do it with the pencil as well. Just make it a little bit darker, closer to the tree, like that. And see how much depth that adds? I love it. I am going to add a little bit more darkness to the bottom of this hill, so that next hill really pops out. I'm just adding a very light bit of this darker green here. It's not too dark, it's like a medium green to get that separation. And then with this hill, I'm going to add a little bit of texture. And because it's such a small area, I'm going to do like little grass marks. Now, if I was doing it for this, I wouldn't. It's just too much to handle, too many marks to make. But here I'm going to add lots of texture and like little marks, just because it's not a huge area to cover and it's definitely doable. So I'm going over with this light kind of olive color first. Might even add, should I do yellow? Little bits of some yellow strokes in there just for a little bit of highlight. And I'm going to go in between these little kind of areas that I mapped out. So when I used the watercolor, I painted kind of around. I lifted because we're going to draw flowers here, and we're going to do it with the pencils. Now you can draw using a pink or whatever color you want. You can draw over green. That's one thing I love about this. Like I was saying, like you can layer lighter colors on top. If I was layering watercolor on top, I would leave parts of those areas white, just because it's harder to get a nice, bright, vibrant color when you have a dark color underneath. So if I'm doing a pink flower or something like that on top, and I have a green base, you're going to get a lot of, it's going to be a more muted pink, just because of that undercolor, and watercolor is transparent. But with pencils, they have pretty great coverage a lot of the time, depending on the color you're using, but most of the time you can cover quite a bit. So I'm gonna pick a color. I want kind of like a bright pinkish color like this. Okay, we have carmine anther, I don't know, quinacridone something. And I'm just gonna do, I don't even know what flowers these are in the reference photo. I'm just gonna do, I don't know, circles, making it darker on one side. I mean, you could do any kind of flowers you really wanted to be honest. And I'm gonna make it darker on one side because I might go in with a lighter color and do some highlights, but I'm gonna darken kind of one side. I'm making just like circles, to be honest. Maybe they're tulips, I don't know. But again, just kind of scribbling these shapes in these lighter areas. And then I'm gonna grab a lighter pink, if I can find one that I want. I mean, this is different, but we're gonna roll with it. Like I said, I don't work too heavily on color matching, but it's bright and it will just make them look a bit more pinky. I'm just adding that to kind of like the highlighted area. They look like tulips. We're gonna run with tulips. It's tulip season right now anyway here. That's what we're gonna do. They actually have a tulip farm nearby, and I really wanted to take the kids, but I also don't want to take them out of school to do it. I don't know, I might still, because it's so much fun picking flowers. All right, and I'm just sharpening my green. Oops. And I'm just gonna do some stems, just up close, so you can see that they're coming from somewhere. They're not just like floating random flowers. I'm gonna grab a little bit of light green here. Do some lighter green strokes too on top. Can even shade around some of those flowers so they pop a bit more. Like so. And that's it. So that's how I've been using my pencils for my landscapes, and I absolutely love the way it turns out. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll see you in our next tutorial. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned something. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and follow me on all my other platforms for tons more content. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye.